For decades, two factories operated by General Electric washed polychlorinated biphenyls into the Hudson River, creating the nation's largest Superfund site. GE has for years challenged the EPA's position that PCBs are harmful to humans.
Let me just start out with this. Were you aware, Mr. Welch, that the study of the health effects on PCBs is difficult to do on human beings because people don't want to be exposed to a probable carcinogen?
Not probable, possible.
Okay. Well, there are many health organizations, including the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, that call it a probable carcinogen.
EPA.
Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric, gave his first testimony last year on GE's pollution of the Hudson River. He was at the helm when the company launched a multi-million-dollar campaign to fight dredging the river. In 2009, several communities along the upper Hudson River sued General Electric for contaminating their water supplies. Videotaped depositions of various GE officials took place over the last 2 years.
The Hudson River is the largest PCB spill on the planet. Okay. Do you agree with that statement?
I have no idea, right or wrong.
Have you ever heard of any other place on the planet where there was a larger dispersal of PCBs in the environment than the Hudson River?
Not that I know of, but I'd never classify this as a spill.
Okay. It says it's the largest Superfund. It is the largest Superfund site in the country. Do you know that to be a true statement?
No, I don't.
Do you believe there are any health effects from PCBs?
General Electric has probably the largest epidemiological study from our workers who worked with PCBs, and my understanding is that those studies have shown that there are no adverse health effects associated with PCBs.
Well, you understood that study had to do with death from cancer, correct?
Objection to form.
Dr. David Carpenter, director of the state's Institute for Health and the Environment, has studied PCB's potential health hazards for decades. He was a member of an international panel that last year declared PCBs as a known carcinogen.
Anyone that says that PCBs have no health effects that are adverse is either ignorant or lying through their teeth. The evidence that PCBs have adverse health effects is overwhelming. The big issue has always been cancer, and those studies that GE funded were primarily focused on cancer. Those were flawed studies. They said it was the largest study ever done. It had over 4,000 people, but it included a lot of secretaries and people that were not even associated with the PCB operations.
So these workers in the GE factory had practices, I'm sure, that were like my lab for a Nobel Prize winner in Urbana, Illinois, where the environmental concerns of chemicals were not that important. So therefore the practices were not perfect. So these people were really exposed. And when we tested them, and when Selikoff tested them, and did not find carcinogenic behavior in these people, it was, as the best of my knowledge, it was lower than it was in the community itself. That gave me great credibility that somebody with mild exposure, with barely exposed, would not have a problem. And we spent hours talking about it with each other and with people, and we came to that conclusion.
Now, cancer is just the tip of the iceberg, because PCBs are now being found to affect almost every organ system of the body. And in my judgment, probably cancer is not the most serious adverse health effect. PCBs affect the brain function. They reduce the ability of both children and adults to learn new things, to remember. And this appears to be an irreversible effect.
GE has fought against the disclosure of thousands of internal company documents including this 1975 memo in which a GE manager questioned the company's environmental priorities.
And it's from the Capacitor Department, Hudson Falls, and it's dated April 5, 1975, correct?
Yeah.
It says, after reading the attached report by Earl Dunham, I couldn't help but feel that we are again rapidly slipping into a lethargic state of mind concerning our environmental affairs. Do you know what Mr. Herger was referring to?
No.
We are seriously violating our discharge permit and need to make several changes to abate the discharge of PCBs in kerosene. Do you know what permit he was referring to?
No.
Do you know what permits were in existence with regard to the discharge of PCBs as of April 1975?
None.
Do you know
No
whether whether or not there was a period of time that lapsed between the time GE applied for a permit and the time it was ultimately received?
I have no idea.
Is it possible that, a period of a year or two may have gone from the time the permit was applied for up until the time it was actually received?
I have no
Objection to
idea.
form. It's not like applying for a driver's license. You go in and apply one day and you get it the next. Takes time. Is that your understanding?
I don't know. I've never gone for a permit.
Okay.
GE's pollution was not limited to PCBs. Trichloroethylene, a toxic solvent, seeped into the ground under dozens of homes near the Fort Edward plant. GE offered a solution.
General Electric contacted us and said they're having a meeting on this whole problem with Stevens Lane. And they had the meeting, and we went, and what they told us in the meeting was that they were planning to give us a new water line. Now, we had an 1.5 inch galvanized water line coming here that went to 3/4, so that you can see how much water we had, pressure, practically none. So they were going to put us in a nice new water line, and they brought out this paper, and it said we signed this paper, they'd put the line in for us. What the paper said that you or your heirs could never go back on GE with anything to do with water. Now, we read that, and something sounded kind of funny here. So we decided not to sign it, and then all we told them was all we're very worried about here is the price of our properties. We don't want to lose our houses. That's all we had.
Len Joyner sued GE, which paid him a settlement for the value of his home. GE also installed ventilation systems in dozens of homes.
And they found out there was trichloroethylene leaking out from the ground into the basements. So GE put these big slabs to filter the trichloroethylene leaving the ground, going in the air. They put one in each house that wanted one. Some people didn't want one. We said, why not? So I have one out there. And they test every year coming. I guess it's working pretty well. I don't know all the details.
In the 1990s, GE initiated a multi-pronged effort to change the public's perception about the dangers of PCBs.
We have seen a massive PR campaign in the upper Hudson River Valley aimed at buying public opinion. We are concerned that these campaigns and the money spent does not tie in with our commitment to integrity from this company. See that?
Yes.
Had you heard that complaint before from people other than Sister Pat?
No, it's just a pad, and maybe some other activists. My integrity was never challenged in this company. Except by a few activists.
That's really
No, whether it be unions or anything else.
well. The question I have to you, Mr. Welch, is: do you recall there being a number of, whether it's authors who were writing articles, shareholders coming to your meetings, newspaper columnists who commented that General Electric was spending millions and millions of dollars on a public relations campaign to try to dissuade the EPA from dredging the Hudson?
Trying to get the facts of the matter out on the table so that people could make a judgment and then be the voice of the people against the government.
In 2009, GE's $1 billion dredging project began in the Hudson River. Despite widespread scientific consensus that PCBs are a health hazard, GE stands firm in its position that there are no adverse health effects from PCBs.
Well, there may well have been statements made by GE employees who had a more engineering background or did not have a background related to anything in the biological or health sciences that simply accepted the party line from the corporation that the river was going to clean itself and that there were no adverse health effects. Certainly the senior people in General Electric, particularly those that had some health background, knew that that was totally false, that there was an enormous body of evidence, some of it actually supported by GE itself. Some of the best documentation today that PCBs cause cancer in animals came from studies that were done at the GE plant in Schenectady.
Isn't it true that you have stated on many occasions that PCBs cause no health threat to people?
That was my belief and is my belief.
Okay. And there are other times when you said that PCBs cause no significant health threat to people. Correct?
I don't know the difference between those two things.
Well, I'm going to ask you, do you think there's a difference between those two things? Do you think there's a difference between a health threat and a significant health threat?
Depends on who's saying it.
Depends on who's suffering the health threat. Wouldn't you
No,
say?
and who's saying it.
Well, let me ask
For
you.
emphasis.
Well, I understand. But would you agree with me as we sit here today,
I don't want a health threat
significant or otherwise?
otherwise.
Okay, I think that would be a good policy.
That's where I am.